Well, everybody, what's the crack? And welcome back to episode number 31 of the Inline G Flute podcast with me, your host, Gareth Houston. Welcome back, my dudes, my dudettes, and all those in between. We are back to the normal last-minute scheduling of this podcast. For a few weeks there, I was really on top of my game. I was like weeks in advance. I thought, I don't have to do any work for a little while, and now it's crept up on me, up the stairs to pinch my wee bum. So this episode's being recorded Tuesday the 30th of January at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it will be going out this Friday the 2nd of Feb. So we're back to last minute, but what's nice is I can talk to you directly, almost in real time. So first of all, how's about that episode last week? Man, Maggie Monnier on this podcast. That was a real pinch me moment for me personally. It was a great episode. It was quite strange to speak in English with Maggie the entire time, but it was fucking cool. It was fucking cool, and it got a lot of traction and a lot of people seeing it. And I think it'll be one of those episodes that will mature with time because people will regularly be searching for her because of who she is. She's a massive superstar in France. I mean, huge, like not just for flute players, but also for musicians in general. So I also feel quite proud to be able to bring her to the Western world. Not the Western world. She's not from Africa. No, to the Western English speaking world. Sorry, excuse me very much. But anyway, that episode did get a bit of traction, and I've got some updated numbers for you guys because we haven't talked about numbers in a while. So I've actually put together a little PDF for sponsors. They'll be going out to Media Kit with all the details of the podcast, demographics, reach, etc., etc. But let's chat a little bit about the last 28 days because I'm so proud of you guys. So we'll start with YouTube. Total views of the last 28 days. We are 1.2 thousand for the podcast in the last month. That is 513 more than a usual month. YouTube is always the worst for this podcast, so I'm very happy with that. The watch time in total is 103 hours, which is 33 hours more than the average 28 days. And subscribers, we are an increase of 48%, which is mad. Now, we've had the Apple podcast, not great, but in the last 28 days, we got 483 plays. But Spotify is where it's at. So I can't get the exact number here, but top sources. So people looking for the podcast through Spotify Home, that is 1,833 in the last 30 days. On Spotify Search, it is 2,336. And Spotify Library, that is 391. So that means the average, the total overall average numbers for this podcast in the last month were around about 6,200 streams. So give yourselves a big fucking pat on the back, man. That is wild. And if you're interested in the audience demographic, the listeners are 48% female, 49% male, and 2% non-binary, and 1% prefer not to say. And over 63% of the listeners are between the ages of 23 and 34. And the top 10 countries in the world in this order for the Inline G podcast in the last month. Number 1, the United Kingdom, then United States, Finland, Canada, Germany, Australia, Brazil, Ireland, letting the fucking sound down there, lads, Denmark, and then España. Social media reach. We all know I've still got this problem with my Instagram account. I'm being shadow banned because of my terrorist threats, apparently. Accounts reached, the reach of the Instagram account since the last 28 days, well, the guests on is 13,299 accounts reached. That is a 137% increase. A lot of the clips have been getting traction. Some of them, the clips with Jill Flutes, for example, have been getting an average of about 8,000 views. Facebook's reach is up to 1,258, which is great because I fucking hate Facebook. So there's our updated numbers, and you guys are to thank for that. I am blown away by these numbers. When I was putting together this PDF kit, I couldn't fucking believe it. Now, a lot of people listen to the podcast because of the big guests. So when you get the likes of Maggie Monnier on, you get people who will just listen to that one episode. But you guys, the core group out there, the people who listen to these episodes, I have you to thank. So I'm glad we can take a little bit of time here to talk, because you guys are messaging me every week. You're always in touch. And I just want to take this little period of calm in the podcast to say thank you to you all. It's you guys with your constant support. There is no we. Cat's out of the bag here. There is no editing team. There is no producer. It's all me. I'm the captain of the ship and I'm going down with it. So it's just me. But I have zero budget for this podcast. I can't afford to put money into it. I'm giving up a lot of my work to do it, so it's a passion project at the minute, but it is zero budget. So you guys constantly commenting and liking and sharing everything has really helped, and I know it's not easy. You don't always want to like it, but throw me a like even without looking at it. The people who do that, God bless you. I know the people out there. There's a couple of you out there who like everything I put up, every story, every picture, every TikTok. You're always there. You guys are doing the fucking Lord's work. It's your fault. It's because of you that we are getting so successful. So I'm so thankful to you guys. It's not glamorous work, but it does work. So it's a little thank you, because it's only the hardcore people in here who are listening. We haven't got the part-time guests in here. I want to give you a little bit of a heads up to who's coming up next in the podcast. So this is just for you guys. I'm not going to clip this. This is just for you guys. Already recorded. I went to Luxembourg last week to meet up with Sophia Neugebauer. If you haven't seen Sophia Neugebauer, go and check it out. So Sophia with a Z. She's very popular on Instagram as well. She was part of the Von Karajan Berlin Philharmonic Academy. She's principal flute in Basel at the minute. Huge soloist, doing an amazing thing. I travelled to Luxembourg to go see her, which was great. We recorded an episode of this podcast in her hotel room, which was amazing. We had so much fun. So that's recorded. That'll be coming out in a week or two. I'm just waiting for Sophia to watch it back, confirm that she's okay with it, suggest any cuts that are possible. I like to give my guests a few weeks to make sure they can do that. I wouldn't put the episode out and just say, oh, here, it's up, go check it out. I always let them say, if you want this cut out or you want that cut out, I give them the time to do it. Also coming up on the list, confirmed guest, not yet recorded, but confirmed to be coming on, Hélène Bouleg, Alexei Kosenko, Philippe Barnes, John Paul Wright from Trevor James Flutes. I've reached out to all these people and they've all confirmed they're coming on. So we got a couple of big weeks. And next week's episode is going to be a very special. I hope it comes through. I'm trying to get the logistics of it in the last minute. But next week, so Thursday the 7th, whatever it is the start of Cologne Carnival. Massive party. So the episode will be coming out on the 8th, and I thought I'd love to get an English-speaking guide to Cologne Carnival and its music. So I'm going to try and record that next Wednesday, and it'll have the first ever returning guest on this podcast. And I'm officially announcing something that I've kept to myself for a while, but I want you guys to help hold me accountable and culpable for this. So I've got a new goal. A few people recently, I'll not say who, but quite big name flute players, very big name flute players, have confirmed that they reckon Emmanuel Bayou would like to come on this podcast. Now, he hasn't said to them directly. I'm not at all inferring that. It was just their opinion that they think strongly he would be up for it if I asked him. So I'm making this my goal. The official goal for the Inline G podcast is by episode 50 or for episode 52, being 1 year, to have Emmanuel Bayou on this podcast. I will go to Berlin to interview him, or wherever he is, I will find him. And I think it's going to happen. So hold me accountable for that. We will get there. But anyway, back to today. We have a big new listenership. I hope a lot of them are sticking in here after the last episode. If you are, it's good to see you. Thank you for sticking around. You're getting to the real part of this the core of this podcast, the lore. I've had a lot of people messaging about requests to know a little bit more about me. Jesus Christ, that was a mouthful. To know a little bit more about me. So I'm doing an episode on myself, which is very odd. It's not a topic I really cover or particularly enjoy covering. I'm very Irish, I'm very humble. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to interview myself like I do my guests, just for a bit of fun. So you lovely lot can get to know me. So my name's Gareth Houston, and this is my story. This is my story. So I'm going to go through it, lads. Just a bit of crack to share with you. I'm going to get personal. We're going to get up and close here. Imagine we were in the pub and it's getting to sort of 2 a.m. and you think, we'll have one more, but we'll make it a whiskey. This is the kind of talk we'd have. So Gareth, how did you start the flute? Well, Gareth, thank you for asking. I started the flute at 6 years old. My granddad was my teacher. Previous episode with him, Brian Houston, that is episode, I think, 27 or 6 or something around that. Anyway, it's up there somewhere. Go check it out. I started playing in flute bands. There's an episode on that as well to know more about that. The bands I personally played with were Gahard Flute Band, based outside Ballynahinch in Northern Ireland, or the north of Ireland. Then I went to Kelswater Flute Band near Ballymena. God, I detested Ballymena. And lastly, Ballyclare Victoria Flute Band. So at the latter two bands, the conductor of the bands was my uncle Glenn Houston, who was still is a banging flute player, a superb player, genuinely. He did a military career. When he was 16, he went off to do army bands, that kind of thing, military bands, which I think if he was growing up in my era, he would have done classical, he would have went orchestral, and he definitely could have, there's no doubts about that. I think just at that time, in the sort of 80s and 90s, the military route was a very safe route for a working class family to send their son to, so it made sense. But he was a great player, and great conductor of bands. So I was playing in flute bands, nothing really serious, going to my granddad, playing along, enjoying it. At 14, I decided I'm going to take it a little bit more seriously, the flute, and I went to get lessons from Colin Fleming. There's not a lot of flute teachers in Northern Ireland, but Colin is the principal flute of the Ulster Orchestra, previously with the Berlin Philharmonic Academy as well. Great player. Colin Fleming is one of the great players, seriously underrated. I loved the lessons with Colin, but I wasn't ready for the intensity that Colin brought. He had a track record of getting students into top music colleges, and I just didn't fucking fancy it. And to be honest, I went with Colin for about 6 months, and then I quit. I quit the flute entirely and stopped for a year. That was about 15 years old, 14 to 15. It was about the same time, coincidentally, that I discovered beer and girls and parties and all those good things in life. So I thought the flute can go fuck itself. So I quit the flute for a year, believe it or not. And then I naturally came back to it at the age of 15, which was a good thing for me, I think. I was never forced to practice, by the way. I never had musical parents. My grandfather obviously was musical, but I never had musical parents. I never once in my life was forced to practice, ever. I'm so fucking thankful for it. So I came back to it naturally at 15, and then I went to Glenn, my uncle, for lessons. Great player, great teacher. He was tough, but he did it in the right way. You know, I always felt like we were in a team. We were working towards a common goal. So I applied for music college, got rejected to quite a few of them. A couple of crazy stories about what happened with the auditions. I had a broken flute, and I had to fly for the auditions to the likes of Manchester and Glasgow, Cardiff, London. It was a bit of a stressful time. No one from my school had ever done it before. No one I knew had ever done it before, to go over to the mainland and try to audition for these places. So it was a bit of a steep learning curve, and I had to go that year, because if I waited 1 year and deferred entry to practice a bit more, the fees tripled. So tuition fees tripled in the UK. So it was either I go this year and pay €3,000 a year, £3,000 a year, or I go the year after and pay 9, which, yeah, Jesus Christ. So I got rejected from a lot. I had a lot of bad habits. And in the formative years, sort of 12 to 15, where you really should be getting your technique down, I wasn't. I was playing tunes and I was enjoying it, but I had a lot of bad habits in my playing, a lot of holes in my technique. I could play to a high level musically, but technically, there was a lot of weird stuff going on. I think a lot of people thought he's not worth the hassle of trying to fix all that. It's too late by the time he's 18. But Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama saw potential in the audition, and they offered me a scholarship, which was incredible. And actually, just after, I was offered another place in another music college, but I decided to go to Royal Welsh because London didn't particularly appeal to me at 18. I think if I was 18 and I went to London, I would have died. Cardiff was a much smaller town or city, beautiful city, but it suited me more. So off I went to RWCMD, Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. I was in total fucking awe. Look up a picture of it. It's like a spaceship, the building. It was incredible, Royal Welsh. The very first night, my mum and dad flew over, and I went to student halls to stay. You know, they helped me get my bag in and stuff, and you had like a little room within an apartment. So there was 6 of us, and we had a room each and a shared kitchen and stuff in a whole building of students. Everyone's 18, everyone's just moved away. My mum and dad helped me get my stuff out of my bag, and then they were like, right, we're going to go now, we'll leave you to it. And I was like, thank fuck, here we go, baby. Open up the bag. I remember sneaking in 6 bottles of Desperados beer. And at this point, I was 18, I was a bit naive, I was Irish, and I had no shyness about me. So I went to every door I could find and just knocked the doors and went, excuse me, does anyone want a party? My name's Gareth, I've just arrived from Belfast, I'm here. And I had a great night that night. Loads of people were up for drinking, and we went to the pub across the road from the halls. I thought, man, this is my life now, with other people who know music. Because where I grew up, I had one friend who was seriously into classical music. The rest, nobody knew anything of it. So to be surrounded by people, it was such a novelty to me. It was great. We went out, had a brilliant night. The next day and the next week, when we were starting to go to college, that's where it became a problem, because English people can be quite awkward, and I kept the same personality that I had drunk as when I am sober, and that was a problem. I was partying with people the night before, you know, giving them hugs, kissing them, singing the Spice Girls, and then the next morning they wouldn't even look at me in the eye, and I found it very weird. And I went really into my shell because of that. My first year in college, I made basically no friends. I flew back home as much as I could on the wee small 50-seater plane from Cardiff to Belfast, but I was constantly going back home, saving up my money and buying flights. I just couldn't stick it. I did make one friend, Scottish fella, but he ended up going to jail. I think he's in jail now still. He was at college. That's a whole other story for another time, but I wonder where he is. But anyway, I loved going to music college. It was still cool to be studying music full time. I remember my first ever history of music class. I was like, fuck, I can't wait for this. I read a lot of history of music books of my own just for the pleasure, because I loved it. I still love it. But I never forget going in, and one of the first topics was Johannes Brahms, because Brahms as a composer, his style seems like a little bit of a throwback to what era he was actually writing in. His contemporaries and stuff were a lot later than you think. Brahms's music is late. Yeah, it sounds kind of late classically, early romantic. It's not too far off Beethoven, but it is in the timeline. It's chronologically, it's much later. So Brahms is a bit of a throwback. So I think it was a bit of a trick question, or a bit of a, for people to go, oh, is it Rachmaninoff or is it Tchaikovsky? And someone put their hand up and said Thomas Tallis was a contemporary of Brahms, which for musicians here, that's fucking laughable. And I thought, oh, maybe not everyone here is as smart as I thought they were, but he was a guitar player, and I mean, no, fuck him. My teachers at Royal Welsh were Roger Armstrong, principal or sub-principal flute of the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. He just retired when I arrived there. He was born in Northern Ireland, actually, left at 8 years old to go to Australia, studied in Australia and played in the South Australian Symphony Orchestra for years, and then came back to the UK. Roger was wonderful. I've waxed lyrical about Roger many, many times in this podcast. He was a great teacher and a great support. And my other teacher was Eva Stewart, who was Principal Piccolo of the BBC National Orchestra of Wales as well. I adored them both, and in my 4 years of study on my bachelor degree, I actually never changed teachers, which normally it was commonplace to change after your second year, but I didn't want to. I absolutely loved them both. So, yeah, Royal Welsh was great fun. I studied there. I had a lot of parties. I had a lot of mates. I lived with a couple of good friends. Did the student university lifestyle. It was great. I learned a lot, and I had a lot of fun, more importantly. At that age of my life, I think it was important. I played a few master classes, Michael Cox and William Bennett and all those lads. And, yeah. Final recital of fourth year, I got absolutely fucked. And all my family came over. I still stand by. It was one of the best recitals I've ever give. But I played the Prokofiev Sonata in its entirety. I played the Baln Fantasy, the Carmen Fantasy. And I played a piece of Irish music, a piece called Night Ride by Brian Finnegan, with my Irish band at the time. And the markers at Royal Welsh deemed that my Irish music, because I spent half of it on Irish whistle and not on flute, they deemed it that it didn't count. So they give me a maximum grade I could reach, which was something like 60%, because I didn't officially fill up the time of the allocated slot for the recital, because for the 10 minutes of that piece they didn't include it. So I was 10 minutes short. Go fuck them. It was a great program, man. It was great. Prokofiev Sonata, Carmen Fantasy, and a big class Irish piece to finish by Brian Finnegan. It was amazing. So I didn't get the best. I got a 2-1 in the end, which is the second best grade you can get, but I would have got a first if I just didn't do that. Highlights of Royal Welsh. There's two that stick out for me. My teacher Roger, after he retired, did some occasional playing with an orchestra called the Bristol Ensemble. It's a chamber orchestra, obviously in Bristol, which is very close to Cardiff. And I did a Beethoven symphony cycle with them, which is my favourite music. And in one of the symphonies, I think it was when we did Beethoven 7, don't know which one, we also did L'Après-Midi by Debussy. So I got to play second flute beside my teacher as he did the Debussy solo. That was a cool moment. That was a moment I'll never forget. And also I got to do the Firebird suite in... No, tell a lie, it's not Firebird. Rite of Spring. I did Rite of Spring in St David's Hall in Cardiff, which is a beautiful venue. So, before we continue on with the interview questions, I have something fucking cool to announce. I'm so excited for this one. Guys, Patreon. I've got one. Fucking got one. And right now, underneath the screens, I hope it goes right here for the YouTube watchers, there's going to be a beautiful banner displayed with the URL of my Patreon, because my editing team are going to put that in. They work magic, those lads. It's live right now. Finally, it is live. It'll be out by the time this is. So, what is a Patreon for those unfamiliar? If you remember how the likes of Baron Gottfried supported Mozart, he was Mozart's patron, and because of his patronage, Mozart actually got to write his first ever opera. Or the Esterhazy family famously were the patrons of Joseph Haydn. And basically everything he ever composed was because of them. Or if we take Paganini himself, Niccolò Paganini was a patron of Hector Berlioz, who also wrote music. So this is the modern digital version of a patron. Patrons have always played a huge part in the arts, and especially in classical music. They allow artists to create music, they fund them. So this is a service that does that. It's a service that allows artists and creators to earn a recurring income with a subscription service for their fans. So it costs £5 a month. There you are. $5, I think. So whatever you're paying in another currency. I don't know if it's still 5 or if it's going to be a little bit less. I'm not entirely sure. But I've set it at 5. So that is the current price of a pint. I don't know about America, but here in Cologne, it's about €4.90 for a pint of Guinness. No, sorry, €5.10. Went up to €5.10 for a pint of Guinness in my favourite pub here. So that's the price of a pint. The reason it's the price of a pint is you get 4 episodes a month on this podcast, usually about an hour each, 40 minutes to an hour. If you listen to all those episodes, or even if you only listen to one episode and you think, fuck, that is brilliant. If I saw Gareth in a pub, I'd buy him a pint or I'd buy him a Dr. Pepper. Well, that's how much this costs. It's roughly about the third of a price of a current Netflix subscription, which is shite. Netflix is shite. So what does your donation do? Firstly, it lets me turn down other work, which is very important. This podcast is taking up a lot of time at the minute. So it allows me to turn down a little bit of other work so I can donate more time to writing scripts, to editing, to production, to messaging flute players, to working out logistics to find other flute players to go and get to them. It also helps cover travel costs, which are going to become more significant. I do offer the option of my guest doing an online interview. It works. It's not as good as being in person. I'm going to reserve the online interviews more for people who are on the other side of the pond over in Canada or America. But people here in Europe, I should be able to get to them in person. So I will travel to them because it's so much better. So it will help cover the travel costs to get me down there and whatever work I'm losing while I'm there. And all that will help expand this podcast. It will make it bigger and better. After getting Magali on last week, the amount of top flute players who are now like, oh yeah, if she's done it, I'm open to do it. Sophia's only coming on because of Magali, I think, and then that's going to roll. And as I've got the top players now, anyone's possible to come on. So that's helping. This podcast is my main creative outlet, and it takes up a lot of my time, and I fucking love every second of it. So there are no more donations to the podcast, no more ad hoc donations, because some of your donations, by the way, were fucking crazy. I think the most someone ever donated was $50, which is insane. You don't have to give me 50 quid, lads. It was way too much. I'm not saying everyone was giving me that, but the ad hoc donations are gone now. So instead, it's just $5 a month. Okay? You won't get extra episodes. Now, I know that's quite shocking for a Patreon service, but bear with me here. I believe this podcast should be free. So what you will get out of your Patreon is you will get an exclusive chance to give questions to ask to all the upcoming guests. So I reserve that purely for the patrons, that you guys can go in and put your questions that you want me to ask the guests, and I will fucking ask them. I'm planning to do some live episodes in the future that will be Patron only. So that'll be nice. And some not with guests. There'll be solo episodes, probably get to know me episodes, that kind of thing. And they will go out to everybody else afterwards. But you'll get them live. Some episodes will get released early. So if I finish editing an episode and it's ready to go, the patrons will get it a few days early. Or maybe a few weeks early, depending on how on top of my game I am. And also I've got some fun ways to build up a community and to talk to each other, and more importantly to support each other through the Patron group. But there will be no extra episodes that will come with it, because I really believe that this podcast should be free for everybody. So if you can afford to donate to the podcast and become a patron, it is amazing, it is incredibly appreciated, it is wonderful, and you're paying for someone who cannot afford it. If you cannot afford it, it's grand, you can listen for free. No problems. Also, with patreon.com, for anyone who's unfamiliar with it, you sign up for a subscription, you can unsubscribe at any time. At any time. It's a bit like an iTunes subscription. So currently I subscribe to 2 other podcasts on Patreon. Shane Todd and Kieran Bartlett, 2 comedians from Bach in Belfast. There are some months where I can't afford the subscriptions. It's 10 quid a month between the 2 of them, but sometimes I'm just a bit skint. I will unsubscribe for that month, not pay it, lose my access to their content, like their exclusive content, and then when I've got a bit more money, I'll resubscribe again. So you can do that with Patreon. You're not locked in for any kind of contract. You can jump in and out as you please. It's 5 quid a month and it's massively appreciated. So here is to the most compassionate, empathetic, and downright fucking hilarious corner of the flute world. I love yous, Slancha. Mwah. That's me sucking on a Monster Energy. So let's continue on with my interview with myself. How did Paris come about? So I finished up at Royal Welsh in... what year did I finish there? I'm 31 now. I finished there when I was 22, so 9 years ago. 2015, is that 2016, something like that? 2014? Something around that. Whatever it is. I'm 31 and finished when I was 22. Work that out. So I didn't want to stay in the UK. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I couldn't afford it. Master's degrees in the UK cost a fucking... I don't know how anybody affords it. I really don't, because funding isn't available for everyone. I don't know how people afford it. And if I went to London, how the fuck do you afford to live in London? It's minimum 2,000 quid a month to safely live in London comfortably. And you're doing a full-time degree, so you can't really work that much. You're not going to be getting a part-time job that pays you $2,000 a month. So I don't know how the fuck people afford it. You must just have to have rich as shit parents. Maybe everyone in the classical music world does, apart from me. But I didn't want to do that. And also, I didn't want to stay in the UK. I was a bit sick of English people. If you think I don't like Americans, wait till you get me fucking started on the Brits, baby. So, Europe, a lot of places in Europe are free. Now, this is post-Brexit. I have 2 passports. I have a British passport and an Irish passport because I'm born in the north of Ireland. And as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, I'm entitled to both. So, Brexit can go fuck itself. I took my Irish passport, and as an EU citizen, I'm entitled to get the same rates in European Union universities as a local is, or a resident. So I looked at places like Finland, Denmark, blah, blah, blah. I did a few lessons and a bit of research. I spent a few weeks in Paris the year before my final year at Royal Welsh. Now, that was simply because my ex-girlfriend was French, and we went over there to spend some time with her family in Paris. While I was there, I was like, fuck, right, well, I'm in Paris. I may as well get some lessons with some top players. The first one I went to was Magali, but unfortunately at that time, Magali wasn't teaching in an institution in Paris. She was teaching up in Lausanne in Switzerland, so I could go privately to her, but I couldn't go register to school with her. She wasn't teaching there. So after that, I tried a few different people, some good, some not so good, and then I met Catherine Canton. Sorry for anglicized spelling, is Catherine Canton, Cantin. She was principal flute of the Paris Opera at that time and held that post for a long time. Only retired, I think, about 4 years. Catherine, she got that job when she was like 19. She's one of the first ever women in an orchestra. She beat off her teacher to get the job in Paris Opera, which was incredible. I will do an episode with Catherine someday, but it will have to be in French, so I have to get the time to put the translation up. But anyway, she invited me. I got a couple of lessons with her. She invited me to go study in her class at La Scola Canton, which I talked about on the French Flute School Definitive Guide of what La Scola is. So go check that out if you don't know about the different types of school and education in France. But just before I went to study there with her and start my degree, she got the new job at the École Normale de Musique de Paris. So voila, off I went. And the fees at the École Normale, it is private, but the fees when I was studying there in the first year were about €2,000 a year. Now that's a lot of money, but I could afford that. You know, either getting money off my parents and doing a bit of work, I could live off that. I could afford that. I could save that up. You can also pay in installments. You didn't have to pay $2,000 at the start of the year. So I did like 800, 400, something like that. There was actually one time where I was a little bit late with the payment, and every time I had to go to the practice room, I had to walk past the administration people, and they used to always be, Monsieur Rouston, Monsieur, and I just fucking bolted up and just ignore them to fuck, because in my bank account at that time, I had fuck all. But I did pay it in the end. I got there in the end. It was just a bit slow getting the money transferred. But anyway, I got a job there as well in Paris. I got many jobs in Paris. My first job was babysitting for a family. So they had a young kid, an American family. Very, very wealthy family. So I went every day after school and picked them up. And then on Wednesdays, French kids got out even earlier. So I had to go at 12 o'clock. But Wednesdays was fun because I had to cook for the kid. So when I cooked for him, the parents told me, oh, if you're cooking for him, you can make the same thing for yourself. Rich people are surprisingly fucking tight. We're like, you have the same thing as he has. And he always wanted some shit. He always wanted the cheapest shit he could get. So I made his stuff, but then his drum teacher came every week. So when he went in for his drum lesson for an hour, I went back into the fridge, got the Wagyu steaks out, got the sushi grade salmon, cooked myself a fucking feast. They were paying me minimum wage and they were rich and they were so strict, man. Fuck them. So if you're listening, guys, I'm sorry, but I had all your Wagyu beef. But I quit that job after a few months because I couldn't study full time and do it. I was missing lessons and I thought this is not the reason I'm in Paris, to do all these lessons and then have to leave them early to do some babysitting for fucking 11 quid an hour. So I got a job after that teaching in some of the local conservatoires, doing a few different things. I was a choir director for a while. I did after school clubs, I did orchestras, I did all that kind of stuff. Either I had one day a week where I had my own school to do it in, and then the rest of the days were after school clubs in different schools as a sub teacher. But it was very busy, and obviously with French employment laws, you were very protected. So it wasn't as like you were paid and you weren't paid if you didn't work. If you didn't work, you still got paid anyway, because this is France, baby, not anywhere else in the world. And yeah, so I studied with Catherine. I studied with her entirely. So she was my teacher at Paris, but I did get lessons with Magali. How that came about was I met Magali through studying with her, and then we chatted a little while, and she wanted someone to look after her kids on Wednesdays to help them with English. So I went to her house every Wednesday before she got home from the orchestra, looked after her kids, and then she gave me a free flute lesson and took me to the orchestra for rehearsals and blah blah blah. So it was a great situation. Our kids are now adults now, which is weird. Well, our oldest daughter is 18, which is weird, man. But anyway, Paris was a lot of fun as well to live in as a city. I fucking adore Paris. I love French culture. I love French food. Can be dodgy as well. Paris is a bit rough sometimes. For example, I remember once I had two friends coming over to visit, and they flew into Charles de Gaulle Airport, and they got the train to Gare du Nord, to Gare du Nord, and I lived just beside Gare du Nord, like 2 stops in the metro. But they got off the train at Gare du Nord, and we were walking up the steps, and we saw a piece of feces, I will say, a big shite on the floor. And I don't know how, but all three of us looked at each other, and we just knew it was human, wasn't dog. And it wasn't because of the size of it or anything like that. There was an aura about it. There was a gravity about the situation, and we all looked at each other, and we didn't say anything, but we knew that did not come from beast, that came from man. And that was like, welcome to Paris, man. There's a big human shite on the door. Once I got mugged as well in Paris. I don't know if I've told this story. When Zach was over, who was in an episode of this podcast, he came over. We were in the pub, the Galway pub, actually, where I recorded the episode with Tomaz. We walked home, like a 45-minute walk home through Paris, but we missed the train. It's like 4 a.m. Walking home, some big fella comes up to me and he's like, excuse me, have you got a euro coin for the parking machine? And I looked at my wallet, I was like, mate, I'm really sorry, I don't have a euro coin for you. And he went, listen, I know this is weird, but can you pay with your card and I'll give you a tenner? And he pulled out this big wad of notes. He's like, look, I've got money, I just don't have a card and I don't have a euro coin and it doesn't take notes. And I was like, yeah, okay. Well, I looked at the machine. It was definitely like an official Paris machine and all that. So I thought, yeah, right, I'll do that. I'm sound. So I put my thing in. I verified €1, definitely €1. Took my card out, put it in my pocket. He gave me a €10 note. We chatted a little while and then off we went on our merry way. The next day, I wake up with a banging headache, hangover. I was actually in Maggie's flat when this happened, and I was like, fuck, where's my bank card? And then I get a phone call, serendipitously, when I realised my bank card wasn't there, from my bank saying, Mr. Houston, is it true that you've spent €6,000 in the last few hours? And I was going, is it? Fuck. I only had about 30 quid in my account. So apparently I went to the police, and apparently it was a known scam that they would put like a little cellophane cover over the buttons, and then they'd pin it off when you go away, and they'll get your PIN code through that, because they'll see which buttons were pressed, and they just have to see the rough shape of your hand where it's going. And then as we're walking off, he just pickpocketed my card, and that was it. And the worst part about it, he went to JD Sports and bought himself some new trainers, the fucking prick. The worst bit was he went and got himself a lunch in my card after his shopping spree. It was all like listed in the shopping centre in the east of Paris, and then right at the end of it was €2.50 in brioche dorée, which I know for a fact at that time in brioche dorée it was an espresso and a croissant for €2.50. So that fucking prick got himself a croissant on my card. I thought, that's just too much. That's what happens in Paris. It's a rough city. But there's another story. When my last flat in Paris, I had 2 roommates, a French girl and a French guy. Actually, he was French. But one night we woke up and his TV was blaring in his room at like 2 o'clock in the morning. So we were fucking out in our jammies, banging the fuck out of his door, going like, get up, turn the fucking TV off. Wouldn't turn it off. And we were like, what the fuck are we going to do? It's going to wake up the whole building. So I realised if I just sneak around to the side, there's the fuse box, trip the switch. All the electricity in the apartment went off, turned it back on, TV was off, great. He didn't fucking wake up. Next day we talked to him, he's like, I don't remember that. And I was like, man, you woke up the entire building. Then the day after that, he started screaming in the night. Proper night, I mean screaming bloody murder. And then the day after that, he got up in the night and he started sleepwalking and tried to walk into my room a few times. Thankfully it was locked. And then the day, well, not me the day after, but shortly after that, my landlady rang me one day when I was at the École Normale and said, Gareth, you need to go home ASAP. We're kicking him out because he hasn't made any of his payments and he's threatened to steal all your stuff. So I had to go back and sit in my room on top of my bed and wait to make sure my stuff didn't get stolen for 3 days. That is Paris. But highlights of Paris, there's many. To be honest, it's just studying with the people I study with. I didn't just study with Catherine as flute. I also had lessons in déchiffrage, which is sight reading. I got great harmony lessons from a woman called Madame Marché, Christine Marché. Sorry, Madame Marché was my sight reading teacher. My solfège teacher, not the American solfège. Solfège is the French word for like music theory and harmony and that kind of stuff, was Madame Maffei, sorry. And my chamber music professor was Nina Paterchek from the Orchestre de Paris. So I had great lessons and I just loved every second of it. Man, studying that kind of place was a fucking pleasure, and a building of that. But highlights, I did get to play in the Salle Coteau a few times, which was massive. And I think the biggest one would be winning the Paris Flute Concours. When you don't win it, I've talked about this in the episode as well, but getting my concours my last year and getting it with unanimity of the jury was a big surprise for me, because I had sort of accepted in my head I was going to Germany. I didn't really care what I got, but I was very happy I got it. I actually didn't get the certificate for it because I didn't do my sight reading exam, because I celebrated finishing my exam by thinking, fuck the sight reading exam, I don't care, because it's meant to not be linked, but I didn't know. I misunderstood it. So one of my friends rang me and was like, Gareth, you're next for the sight reading exam. They're calling your name. Where are you? And I was like, I'm in Belfast eating chips. I booked myself a flight and went to a pub and got chips. And I didn't get my degree because of it. I did get it eventually. At the time, it was a whole fucking thing. I got it eventually. But anyway, that were the highlights. And then I went to Germany, Deutschland, where I am now. So I live in Cologne, way over the never eat shredded wheat, west of Germany. So the reason for that was my flute playing was going well in Paris and I learned a lot, but there were still those things in my technique from childhood that I just hadn't learned. So I had a lot of fixes and ways around them, but I wanted to make sure I just properly fixed them once and for all. And it was kind of last chance saloon. I was like 26 and thought, if I don't fix these issues now, I'm probably never going to fix them. There was one guy who was known for it, and that was Robert Wynne, old principal flute from the London Philharmonic Orchestra, legendary teacher here in Cologne, English guy. So I came over here, got a few lessons with him. He offered me to come study in his class, and that was it. I moved to study with him. Now, I won't talk too much about Robert on the podcast, but I will say incredible flute teacher in terms of how he teaches and what knowledge he has, and he transformed my playing. My playing after going to Robert was where I wanted it to be, and it is where I wanted to be now. So yeah, I had that in the first year. I've been in Cologne now for 5 years. Year or two I had that. Then Corona hit, that wee bug that was going around. I went home, not deliberately. My mum was getting married. I flew home for that, and then it was lockdown the next day, and I got stuck at home for a long time. Now, when I was with Robert, I was doing little bits and jobs, little jobs here and there to make money, teaching, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't doing much. I wasn't making friends. I was living with my ex-girlfriend. During Corona, when I went home, I did a lot of thinking. I broke up with my ex-girlfriend. I went back. I thought, do I go back to Cologne? Or do I go back to Paris? Or do I stay in Ireland? Or where am I going next? And what am I doing with my life? I thought, I'll go back to Cologne, give it a lash. So I moved into a new apartment, a flat share, with a couple of lads, brilliant lads. Jakob was one of them from episode 10. And we had a great time. And I sort of decided for the last year or so of Corona, I would just practice my ass off. And just, that's what I did. I spent 6 hours a day practicing. I lost like 30 kilos of weight. I learned German. I did all those things that you fuckers said you wouldn't do. Remember, everyone was like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that in Corona and lockdown. You didn't. I did it all. I was very happy with myself. Corona was great. I could do with another wee pandemic. So I did all that. And it was great. And then as I started to come out of that, I have a new girlfriend now. It was great. I saved up a shitload of money. I worked for a school called the GF Handel Music Academy here, which that's the last time I'll say their name in this podcast, because absolutely fuck them. And there is an episode coming out in that. But anyway, I worked there, saved up enough money to get my own flat. Now, I don't mean buy a flat, I rent, but in Germany, even if you rent a flat, it comes with nothing in terms of furniture. They even take their floors with them. So Germans will take their carpet and bring it to the new flat. They take their kitchens. So you have to buy all this shit. So it cost me a couple of €1,000 to buy a kitchen, sofa, TV, every bit of furniture, fucking light fixtures. I had to drill the holes in the roof to put the lights in. Man, the Germans take everything with them when they rent. Everything. So I spent a bit of time doing that. And then I've got my lovely new flat here since just over a year. And in the last 6 months to a year, what have I done? Well, I started a little podcast called the Inline G Flute Podcast, which was a great outlet. I've got a private teaching studio now, which has really grown. I'm actually nearly at capacity for lessons. I will talk about that in the future. People have asked me to mention this. I do offer online lessons. I do teach. Sorry, excuse me there. I thought I forgot to hit record. Yeah, I do teach. I do teach online. I'll be doing more on that, but you can get online lessons with me. If you want to study with me, I'd be delighted to. I bring this kind of energy to lessons, so you can imagine how I love teaching. I really love it. It's a lot of fun. So I teach. I work at Bayer Leverkusen Football Club, which has been honestly the greatest job of my life. It's a team I support. It's a team I love. It's the best team in Europe, and it was great to get a job that I adore away from music. Now that's not even part-time. That's when I'm free. I go down and work for them a couple of times a week sometimes it's 2 weeks without. But I've always practiced. I've always kept my flute playing up because I've decided I would like to get back into playing. Performing. I've never given up playing. But performing I haven't done much of in the last 6 months. I didn't want to be totally honest. I haven't really had the desire to do it. It got a bit too pressuring to go for auditions. I was getting sick of auditions. Because even though sometimes they were going well, over the last few years I've done quite a few orchestral auditions. Sometimes I've got through to like the later rounds. Sometimes you're booted out after fucking 10 seconds of playing. And it was so much work and so much practice for it, and I thought I need a break from this. So I'm getting back into playing, and there is a couple of things in the pipeline, which is quite exciting. All I'd really love, to be honest, right now is 1 or 2 days a week of extra work. Like a little part-time social media management job or something to just give me that little last. Like, I'm not bad for money. Like, I'm financially secure, but I'm not rich by any extent. I survive. I'm skint, but I survive. You know what I mean? And yeah, I would like to just make 1 or 2 days more worth of income. So that's the story. Morning glory. I'm going to finish maybe with the fun questions that I normally ask every other guest. So, first question, do I play inline or offset G? I play inline G, obviously, because this podcast is called that. I mean, if I wanted to change now, I'm going to die on this hill. Offset G probably will be better at this point. It probably is. But listen, that looks nicer. I've called the podcast this. We're fucked. I'm sticking with it. Favorite flute concerto? I love the Eber concerto, the slow movement especially. Not mad for the Nielsen concerto. Love the Mozart concertos. D minor CP Bach is wonderful. The Jolivet concerto is magnificent. I think if I'm going to have to go for my absolute favourite flute concerto, I've never actually played it, but I'd probably say the Marc-André Delbevy concerto. It's really cool. I love contemporary music, so I'd say that or La Notte, the Vivaldi concerto. There's my two answers. The first flute CD or album that I bought, yes, I remember very clearly, that was Raffaele Trevisani with, I think it was his wife, played piano on it. It was like a recital CD, not live, but recital. Paola Girardi, I think her name was. I think it's his wife. I might be wrong. And it was kind of like showpieces. So Carmen Fantasy was on that. Ron de Lutin was on that. A couple of other things. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant album. Italian flute player. Galway kind of school. Fucking brilliant. First CD or album in general I bought. Easy peasy. That was Sum 41. All killer. No filler. The greatest thing to come out of Canada since... I don't know what came before that. Shania Twain. Brilliant. They were a pop punk band. They were like Blink 182 but good. Favorite place in the world for food? Not Germany. Probably Paris. Like the food you get in Paris is incredible. I think the best meals I've had in my life are in Paris. Although tell a lie, the best meal I've ever had recently was actually in Germany. It was here in Cologne in a restaurant called Potkind. It's a Michelin starred restaurant. It was fucking unbelievable. I'd probably say Paris. Although I love Spanish food as well. Big into Japanese food. I love spicy food, but I've never been to Japan. If anyone wants to sponsor me to go to Japan, I'd be delighted to. But I eat literally anything. There's 1 or 2 foods in my life I can remember not eating. Once in France, I got a pig's brain. It was boiled as well. Wasn't mad. No, sheep's brain. Wasn't mad on that. Went to a very famous restaurant. Didn't really speak French at the time. Asked the guy for the special. Said, I'll take that. And it was boiled brain. It wasn't great. So that's one of the few things I wouldn't eat. But most things, like spicy food, fucking love it. Pretty much everything else I love. But if I have to pick, I'll go with Paris. And I'll go for Au Petit Grec. There we are. It's a crepe restaurant in Rue Mouffetard. Fucking unbelievable. I do a Greek crepe with tahama, like that. It's kind of like caviar, but it's pink. And feta. Fuck me. Fusion food at its best. A piece you haven't performed that you want to. Easy. I would love at some point in my life to play the Mozart flute quartet in D major. That's a piece I've always dreamed of playing with a string quartet, a string trio plus me. If I could have any job outside of music, what would I do? I think it's hard to answer that because there's nothing that's particularly attracted me. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be an accountant, which is very strange. Honestly, I think it'd be working in football in some kind of manner. I think my absolute dream job would be social media football social media management. So working for a big European club in their social media team. Dream of all dreams would probably be for Chelsea or Bayer Leverkusen, one of the two. That would be very cool. Favorite drink, alcoholic or non-alcoholic? Favorite non-alcoholic drink is definitely Spezi, man. If you haven't had Spezi, you won't get it over there, but it's a mixture of cola and Fanta. There's different brands, but Spezi is kind of like the generic term. But there is one called Spezi by Paulaner. Oh my god, it's like an orange flavored Coke. It's unbelievable. Comes in glass bottles. It's delicious. Mezzomix as well is another brand of it. Spezi's good. Favorite alcoholic drink? Anything, as long as it's wet. No, I love Buckfast. It's a tonic wine from Northern Ireland. I tried to get a bottle of it for this episode, but it is Tuesday afternoon. If I had a bottle of Buckfast now, I would fucking wreck the place. So it was going to be a bit much to do that. So yeah, I'd probably say Buckfast. My favorite cocktail is a grasshopper. My favorite beer is definitely Guinness. I'm a madman for a pint of Guinness. But I do love the Kölsch beer you get here. I'm a big fan of that. I love a Radler. I love that one in America. What's that real scumbag beer you guys drink over there? Pabst Blue Ribbon. It's fucking class. Actually, my favorite American beer is definitely Bud Light Lime. Man, that's fucking great. It's like drinking limey water that gets you drunk. It's great. Anything else? And wine. I'm a big wine boy. My favourite wine is Beaujolais Nouveau, which a lot of people joke, it's not wine because it's a very young wine and you get it fresh in the new Beaujolais season, but I fucking love Beaujolais Nouveau. And there's also Bordeaux. Big fan for Bordeaux. Crémant, I like as well. Blanc de Blanc. Oh, fuck. And champagne. Man, who can say no to champagne? And the last thing I'm going to say in this podcast before I just get the fuck out of here, because a lot of people have been asking about this. Now, this might kill any chance I got a sponsorship, but I'm going to address this once and for all. I had a small controversy about politics recently. Now, I'm a very political person. If anyone's on my Instagram, you'll probably know that. I can't say it as much anymore because Instagram keeps stinging me for it, but I am a very political person and I feel very passionate about politics. I don't bring it to this podcast because I don't think there's a need for it. If I did think there was a need for it, I would. So I will never talk about it with guests. I'll never bring it up in that sense. But just to be clear where I stand on all these things, because I've been accused recently of some people of being pro this and pro that, which couldn't be wronger. I don't sit in the fence with politics. There's very few things I sit in the fence with. So I'm left-wing as fuck. Okay? I'm Irish. And I'm a very proud Irish person. Ireland is a socialist country, and the idea of Ireland is to always be a socialist state. So my politics, very, very simple. I think in the developed world, every country should give every single person 3 things, and that is affordable housing, free healthcare, and free education. Every single person in a developed country should have all 3 of those things. That's it. That's my political views. If you want to ask me about certain conflicts or certain wars, you know where I stand. I'm not going to go into them all. I'm obviously pro-Palestine, for example. That's not going to be a surprise to anybody. I'm Irish. Okay, so my politics are very left-leaning, and I will leave it at that. But I love a good political debate, and I love getting stuck into talking to people about politics, so yeah. That's going to get me fucking cancelled, baby. Anyway, we're done. Guys, I'm going to finish this Monster Energy and get back to work. So yeah, thank you all for listening. I hope this was an interesting episode. It might have been a weird one, but I wanted to get this all out of the way. It is a bit of a filler episode as well because next week we're going to have the Cologne Carnival episode. I hope where I'm going to get very, very drunk on air in a Cologne pub and do some really fun things. That'll be high energy. The week after will be Sophia's episode, which is excellent. I've already watched it back and I'm so delighted that's going to be coming out soon. And then I think after that will be straight into another guest episode. I really think so. In solo episodes, there is one more planned on toxic masculinity, which will be coming out soon. That's not going to be a fun episode, so please be aware of that when that comes out. It's not going to be fun, but I think it's an important episode. And yeah, that's it. So this was a fun one in the middle. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys look after yourselves. Have a lovely, lovely weekend if you're listening to this on a Friday. If you're listening to it during the week, you're nearly at Friday. So enjoy the rest of your week. Guys, thank you all for the support. Here is to 6,000 more listeners next month. Big love, big smooches. Mwah.